My wife laughed in divorce court until the judge started reading my financial disclosures. She thought she married a simple AC repairman. She had no idea what I'd really built. But that wasn't even the worst betrayal. She'd been stealing our kids' college funds. My name is David Pierce. I'm 44 years old, and I've spent the last 18 years building Pierce Industrial Climate Solutions from the ground up. What started as me and a beat-up van doing basic HVAC repairs has grown into the premier commercial and industrial air conditioning contractor in 3 states. We handle everything from massive warehouse cooling systems to specialized climate control for pharmaceutical companies. It's not glamorous work, but it pays well, better than most people realize. I met Valerie at a 4th of July barbecue back in 2006. She was 24, fresh out of college, working as a marketing coordinator for some startup that went belly up 6 months later. She had this laugh that could light up a room and a way of making you feel like you were the most interesting person she'd ever met. We got married 2 years later, and I thought I'd hit the jackpot. Our kids came along pretty quickly after that. Samuel's 17 now, a senior in high school with a full ride to state for football. Aurora's 15, smart as a whip, and already talking about pre-med. They're good kids, and for the longest time, I thought we were the picture-perfect American family. The first sign something was wrong came about 6 months ago. Valerie started complaining that I worked too much, that I cared more about my business than my family. Fair enough. I've been putting in long hours trying to land a massive contract with a pharmaceutical company that would set us up for years. But when I tried to plan a family vacation to make up for it, she said she'd already made plans with her sister. Then came the new clothes, the gym memberships, the late nights catching up with girlfriends. She started taking her phone into the bathroom with her, something she'd never done in 16 years of marriage. When I asked about it, she got defensive, said I was being paranoid and controlling. The breaking point came on a Tuesday morning in March. I was up early, getting ready to drive out to a job site 2 hours away. Valerie was still in bed, but her phone was buzzing nonstop on the nightstand. Without thinking, I glanced at it. The screen showed a text from someone named TM. Can't wait to see you tonight. Same place as usual. My stomach dropped like I'd been sucker punched. I stood there for maybe 30 seconds, just staring at those words, trying to make them mean something else. But deep down, I knew exactly what they meant. I didn't confront her that morning. Instead, I drove to my job site and spent 8 hours installing ductwork while my mind raced through every suspicious moment from the past few months. By the time I got home, I'd made a decision. I wasn't going to be one of those guys who buried his head in the sand and pretended everything was fine. That night, after Valerie went to bed early claiming a headache, I started making calls. The first call I made was to my lawyer, Jim Patterson. We'd done business together for years. He'd handled all my contracts and corporate paperwork. When I told him what was going on, his voice got serious real quick. David, Jim said, before you do anything else, you need to document everything. Get a private investigator, change your passwords, and whatever you do, don't tip your hand until we're ready. The second call went to Mike Torino, a former detective who now ran his own investigation firm. Mike had done background checks for me when I was hiring key employees. He was thorough, discreet, and had a reputation for getting results. How long has this been going on? Mike asked after I filled him in. I don't know, I admitted. Could be weeks, could be months. Don't worry, Mike said. Cheaters always leave a trail. Give me 2 weeks, and I'll have answers. While Mike worked his magic, I started my own investigation at home. I installed security cameras around the property, told Valerie it was because of some break-ins in the neighborhood. She bought it without question. I also started paying closer attention to her schedule, her excuses, her behavior. The changes were obvious once I knew what to look for. Valerie had started working out religiously, bought new lingerie that I never saw her wear, and developed a sudden interest in girls' nights out that happened twice a week. She'd come home smelling like expensive cologne that definitely wasn't mine. Samuel noticed something was off too. One evening after dinner, he pulled me aside in the garage. Dad, Samuel said, is everything okay with you and Mom? She's been acting weird lately. I looked at my son, 17 years old, built like a linebacker, but still worried about his parents' marriage. What do you mean weird? I asked. She's always on her phone, and yesterday, I heard her talking to someone about meeting up. When she saw me, she got all jumpy and ended the call real quick. I put my hand on his shoulder. "Don't worry about it, son. Your mom and I are working through some things. Just focus on your studies and football, okay?" But inside, my heart was breaking. Not just for me, but for Samuel and Aurora. They didn't deserve to have their family torn apart because their mother couldn't keep her vows. 2 weeks later, Mike called with an update that made my blood run cold. "David," Mike said, "we need to meet. And bring your lawyer." The meeting was scheduled for the next morning at Jim's office. Mike laid out photos, phone records, and surveillance reports like he was presenting evidence in a murder trial. The target was clear: Trent McCabe, a pharmaceutical sales rep who'd been sniffing around some of my commercial clients. The affair had been going on for 4 months. Hotel meetings twice a week, weekend trips when Valerie claimed to be visiting her sister, even rendezvous in the parking lot of Samuel's school after his football practices. "There's more," Mike said, sliding another folder across the table. "She's been bad-mouthing you to mutual friends, telling people you're emotionally distant, and that the marriage has been dead for years." Jim leaned forward. "David, we need to move fast. If she's already setting the narrative, she might be planning to file first." That afternoon, I made one more call to a locksmith. Time to start protecting what I'd spent 20 years building. The divorce papers hit Valerie like a freight train on a Tuesday morning. I watched from the kitchen window as the process server handed her the envelope. She stood there in her yoga pants and designer sports bra, reading the first page with her mouth hanging open. When she came inside, her whole demeanor had changed. Gone was the confident woman who'd been living a double life. Now she looked panicked, almost desperate. "David," Valerie said, waving the papers, "what is this? We can work through our problems. We don't need lawyers. We needed honesty." I replied calmly. "That ship sailed about 4 months ago." The weeks leading up to the hearing were brutal. Valerie hired Patricia Steinberg, one of the most aggressive divorce attorneys in the state. Steinberg had a reputation for bleeding men dry in divorce proceedings. She obviously thought I was just another contractor with a modest income and some equipment to split up. The day of the hearing arrived with typical October weather, gray skies, and a cold wind that cut right through your jacket. The courthouse steps felt like walking up to an execution. Inside the courtroom, Valerie sat with her attorney, whispering and occasionally laughing like she was at a social event. She dressed carefully, conservative blue suit, minimal makeup, playing the role of the wronged wife perfectly. Steinberg opened with standard procedure, requesting spousal support and 50% division of marital assets. She painted me as a workaholic who neglected his family, driving his wife to seek companionship elsewhere. "Your Honor," Steinberg said confidently, "Mrs. Pierce simply wants her fair share of the modest family business and reasonable support while she rebuilds her life." Valerie nodded along, even managed to dab at her eyes with a tissue. The performance was Oscar-worthy. Then Judge Morrison started reading the asset disclosure report that Jim had filed. Pierce Industrial Climate Solutions, valued at $2.8 million, the judge read. Commercial real estate holdings in 3 states, valued at $4.2 million. Investment portfolio and retirement accounts totaling $1.6 million. Liquid assets. I watched Valerie's face change as each number was announced. The confidence drained away like water from a broken pipe. Her attorney stopped taking notes and started staring at the papers like they were written in a foreign language. "Mrs. Pierce," Judge Morrison continued, "I see here that you waived spousal support and agreed to forfeit any claim to business assets in a prenuptial agreement amended in 2019. Is that correct?" Valerie's voice barely worked. Yes, but I didn't understand what I was signing. "According to these documents, you were represented by independent counsel, and the signing was videotaped. Do you dispute that?" The silence in that courtroom was deafening. Valerie's face had gone completely white. Her laughter from 30 minutes earlier suddenly didn't seem so appropriate. The aftermath of the hearing was swift and brutal. Within hours, Valerie was blowing up my phone with calls and texts I refused to answer. She tried showing up at my office, but my secretary had strict instructions: no personal visitors during business hours. Samuel was the first to figure out something major had happened. "Dad," Samuel said that evening, "Mom's been crying all day, and she won't tell me why. What's going on?" I looked at my son, this 17-year-old who was about to become the man of the house sooner than he'd planned. He deserved the truth, or at least part of it. Your mother and I are getting divorced, I said simply. She made some choices that I can't forgive. Is it another man? Samuel asked quietly. The question hit me like a punch to the gut. Yes, son, it is. Samuel nodded slowly, processing information that no teenager should have to handle. What happens now? Now we move forward. The three of us. Aurora took the news harder. She locked herself in her room for 2 days, only coming out for meals. When she finally talked to me, her first question broke my heart. Dad, Aurora said, did I do something wrong? Is that why Mom doesn't want to be here anymore? I pulled my daughter into a hug that lasted about 5 minutes. Sweetheart, this has nothing to do with you or your brother. Your mother made adult decisions that have adult consequences. You kids are the best thing that ever happened to me. Meanwhile, Valerie had moved in with her sister across town, but that arrangement lasted exactly 1 week. Apparently, even family members don't appreciate being lied to about extramarital affairs. The messages started coming daily. First, they were angry. You planned this whole thing. You manipulated me into signing that prenup. Then they turned desperate. I made a mistake. Can't we try counseling? I'll end it with Trent, I promise. Finally, they became threatening. I'll tell everyone you were abusive. I'll make sure you never see the kids again. That last message was a mistake. I forwarded it directly to Jim Patterson, along with screenshots of all the others. David, Jim said when I called him, she just handed us everything we need for the final decree. Keep these messages coming. But the real revelation came when I got a call from my business accountant, Larry Stevens. David, Larry said, I've been looking through the books, and there's something you need to know. Remember that education fund you set up for the kids back in 2018? The one Valerie had signatory access to. My stomach dropped. What about it? It's empty. Completely cleaned out. The withdrawal started 6 months ago. $120,000 gone. Money I'd saved specifically for Samuel's college and Aurora's future education. Money that Valerie had apparently spent on her new boyfriend and whatever fantasy life she'd been building. That night, I made another call to Mike Torino. Time to dig deeper into exactly what my wife had been doing with our family's money. 3 weeks after the divorce was finalized, I got a call that changed everything. Dr. Patricia Williams from the genetics lab had results that would shake our family to its core. Mr. Pierce, Dr. Williams said carefully, we need to discuss Aurora's paternity test results in person. My hands were shaking as I drove to the lab. I'd ordered the test on a hunch, something about Aurora's blood type that never quite made sense when she needed surgery 2 years ago. The timing coincided perfectly with when Valerie's behavior first started changing. Mr. Pierce, Dr. Williams said as I sat across from her desk, I'm afraid Aurora is not your biological daughter. The probability of paternity is 0%. The room started spinning. My little girl, my princess who looked up to me like I hung the moon, wasn't mine. 15 years of bedtime stories, dance recitals, and father-daughter moments built on a lie. How long have you suspected? Dr. Williams asked gently. Recently, I managed to say. There have been other men. That evening, I sat in my truck outside the house for 2 hours, trying to figure out how to tell Aurora. She was inside doing homework, probably wondering why Dad was acting so strange lately. When I finally went inside, Aurora was in the kitchen making herself a sandwich. Dad, Aurora said, you look terrible. Are you okay? I looked at this beautiful 15-year-old who'd called me Dad her entire life, and I made a decision that surprised even me. I'm fine, sweetheart, I said, pulling her into a hug. Just had a long day at work. Biology didn't make her less my daughter. I'd changed her diapers, taught her to ride a bike, and been there for every scraped knee and broken heart. Some lying fool might have contributed DNA, but I was her father in every way that mattered. But Valerie was going to pay for this deception. The next morning, I called Jim Patterson with the test results. David, Jim said after reviewing the documents, this changes everything. Fraud, misrepresentation, potentially criminal charges. We can reopen the entire divorce settlement. No, I said firmly. Aurora doesn't need to know. I don't want this dragged through court. But I want Valerie to know that I know. What do you have in mind? A conversation. Just the two of us. That afternoon, I sent Valerie a simple text. We need to talk. Tonight. Come alone. She showed up at 8 o'clock sharp, probably hoping I'd change my mind about the divorce. "David," Valerie said as she walked into the living room, "I'm so glad you called. I've been thinking." "Sit down, Valerie," I interrupted, placing the DNA test results on the coffee table. Her face went white as she read the first page. "Who is Aurora's real father?" I asked calmly. The silence stretched for nearly a minute before she finally spoke. "It doesn't matter now," Valerie whispered. "It matters to me. 15 years of lies, Valerie. 15 years of watching me love a child while you knew the truth." She started crying, but they weren't tears of remorse. They were tears of someone who'd finally been caught in the ultimate deception. The confrontation with Valerie should have been the end of it, but I'd underestimated her mother, Margaret Walsh. 3 days after our DNA discussion, Margaret showed up at my office like an avenging angel in a Cadillac. "David Pierce," Margaret announced as she barged past my secretary. "We need to have words." Margaret had never liked me. From day one, she'd made it clear that her precious daughter deserved better than a glorified repairman. The fact that this glorified repairman was now worth nearly $10 million probably stung even more. "Mrs. Walsh," I said, standing up from my desk, "this is a place of business. If you want to discuss family matters." "Family matters?" Margaret interrupted, her voice rising. "You destroyed my daughter's life over some midlife crisis nonsense. Now you're spreading lies about Aurora's paternity." So Valerie had told her about the DNA test. "Interesting choice. The only lies being spread came from your daughter," I replied calmly. "For 15 years. Margaret's face turned red. "Valerie made one mistake." "One? And you're acting like she committed murder." "One mistake." I couldn't help but laugh. "Your daughter stole over $100,000 from our children's education funds to spend on her boyfriend. She's been lying and cheating for months, maybe years. That's not one mistake. That's a pattern of deception. You drove her to it." Margaret shouted. "Working all the time, never showing her any affection. What did you expect?" I expected my wife to act like an adult and talk to me if she was unhappy, not steal from our children and sleep with pharmaceutical salesmen. Margaret stood up abruptly, knocking over her chair. "This isn't over, David. I have friends in this town. I'll make sure everyone knows what kind of man you really are." "Go ahead," I said, walking around my desk to face her. "I've got bank records, hotel receipts, and phone records that tell the real story. Bring it on." After Margaret stormed out, I called my security company to upgrade the cameras at both my office and home. I also made a note to warn Samuel and Aurora that their grandmother might try to poison them against me. That evening, Samuel came home with news that confirmed my suspicions. "Dad," Samuel said, "Grandma Walsh called me today. She says Mom wants to see Aurora and me, but not at your house. She wants us to meet her at some hotel." "What did you tell her?" "I told her I'd think about it." "But Dad," something felt off. "Grandma was asking weird questions about your business, about how much money you really have." It felt like she was fishing for information. Smart kid. Margaret was probably planning some kind of custody challenge or trying to find assets the divorce court had missed. "Samuel," I said, "I need you to be extra careful around your grandmother. Don't share any information about our finances, our living situation, or anything else. Can you do that?" "Already on it, Dad. I don't trust her any more than I trust Mom." Later that night, I got a call from Mike Torino with disturbing news. "David," Mike said, "Margaret Walsh has been asking questions around town. She hired a private investigator to look into your business. She's also been spreading rumors that you're hiding assets from the divorce court." "Let her look," I said. "Everything's legal and documented. But keep an eye on her. I have a feeling this is just the beginning." I was right. Margaret Walsh was just getting started, and she was about to make Valerie's affair look like a minor inconvenience. Margaret Walsh's war escalated faster than I'd expected. Within a week of her office visit, she'd hired the most expensive family law firm in the state to challenge my custody of the kids. Her strategy was simple but vicious. Paint me as an unfit father who'd manipulated the divorce proceedings. The petition arrived on a Friday afternoon, delivered by the same process server who'd handled my divorce papers. This time, Margaret was requesting emergency custody of both Samuel and Aurora, claiming I was emotionally abusive and financially manipulative. "This is insane," Jim Patterson said as we reviewed the documents. "She has no standing for custody." She's not even the children's guardian. She's their grandmother, I replied. And she's got deep pockets and connections. The emergency hearing was scheduled for the following Tuesday. Margaret had somehow convinced the judge that the children were in immediate danger, requiring urgent intervention. That weekend, I sat down with Samuel and Aurora to prepare them for what was coming. Kids, I said, your grandmother is trying to take you away from me. She's going to say terrible things about me in court, and you might hear some of them. Aurora looked confused. Why would Grandma Walsh want to take us away? She blames me for the divorce, I explained. She thinks I treated your mother unfairly. Samuel, now 18 and legally an adult, was furious. Dad, I'm not going anywhere. And neither is Aurora, if I have anything to say about it. The hearing was a circus. Margaret's attorney, Richard Steinman, presented a case built entirely on speculation and character assassination. Your Honor, Steinman argued, Mr. Pierce systematically isolated his wife, controlled family finances, and created an environment of emotional abuse that forced Mrs. Pierce to seek companionship elsewhere. I watched Margaret nodding along from the gallery, playing the concerned grandmother to perfection. When it was our turn, Jim kept it simple. Your Honor, Jim said, Mrs. Walsh has presented no evidence of abuse, neglect, or unfitness. Mr. Pierce is a successful businessman who's provided a stable home for his children throughout this difficult period. Samuel is 18 and has chosen to remain with his father. Aurora, at 15, has expressed the same preference. The judge looked tired and annoyed by the entire proceeding. Mrs. Walsh, Judge Hendricks said, while I understand your concern for your grandchildren, I see no evidence that would justify removing them from their father's custody. Petition denied. Margaret's face turned purple with rage as she stormed out of the courtroom. But I knew this wasn't over. If anything, it was just the beginning of her campaign against me. 6 months after the custody battle, life had finally started to settle into a new normal. Samuel had graduated high school with honors and was planning to study business at the state university before joining the family company. Aurora was thriving in her sophomore year, her grades better than ever despite the family turmoil. The business was booming too. Word had gotten out about my divorce and the real scope of Pierce Industrial Climate Solutions. Potential clients who'd previously seen me as just another contractor now understood they were dealing with a serious player in the commercial HVAC market. That's when I met Rebecca Taylor. She walked into my office on a Thursday morning wearing a sharp business suit and carrying blueprints for a pharmaceutical manufacturing facility that would require the most sophisticated climate control system I'd ever designed. Mr. Pierce, Rebecca said, extending her hand, I'm the project manager for Davidson Pharmaceuticals. We need someone who understands precision climate control for sensitive manufacturing processes. Rebecca was 38, recently divorced herself, with twin boys who were Aurora's age. She was intelligent, direct, and had no interest in playing games or manipulating situations for personal gain. Our first meeting lasted 3 hours as we discussed the technical requirements for pharmaceutical-grade air filtration and temperature control. Our second meeting, ostensibly about project timelines, lasted until the restaurant closed. I should probably mention, Rebecca said over dessert, that I did some research on you before taking this meeting. I raised an eyebrow. And I know about your divorce, about what your ex-wife put you through. I want you to know that I'm not interested in anyone's money or assets. I've got my own career and my own financial security. It was refreshing to meet someone who was upfront about their situation instead of playing elaborate games. 3 months later, Rebecca and I were officially dating. The kids loved her. She was smart enough to hold her own with Samuel's football talk and patient enough to help Aurora with her advanced chemistry homework. More importantly, she understood the value of honesty. After years of living with Valerie's deceptions and manipulations, being with someone who said exactly what she meant felt like a luxury I'd forgotten existed. When Aurora asked me one evening if I was happy, I realized I could answer honestly for the first time in years. Yeah, sweetheart, I said. I really am. For the first time since this whole nightmare began, I was looking forward to the future instead of just surviving the present. 2 years after the divorce, Valerie made one last desperate play. She'd been living in a rundown apartment across town, working at a retail job that barely covered her bills. Trent McCabe had dumped her 6 months after the divorce when he realized there'd be no financial windfall. Margaret Walsh's legal crusade had bankrupted her, leaving both women bitter and broke. But they weren't done fighting. The showdown came on a Tuesday evening when I was having dinner with Rebecca and the kids. Valerie and Margaret showed up unannounced, demanding to speak with Samuel and Aurora. "You can't keep poisoning my children against me," Valerie declared as she barged into my dining room. "Nobody's poisoning anyone," I replied calmly, standing between her and the kids. "You created this situation with your choices." "Our choices," Margaret interjected. "You drove her to it with your coldness and obsession with work." Rebecca, who'd been quietly eating her dinner, finally spoke up. "Ma'am, I don't believe we've met. I'm Rebecca Taylor, David's girlfriend." "Another victim," Margaret sneered. "He'll do the same thing to you that he did to my daughter." Rebecca smiled politely. "Actually, I know exactly what he did to your daughter. He worked 18-hour days to build a business that could provide for his family. He saved money for his children's education while your daughter spent it on her boyfriend. He honored his marriage vows while she was sleeping with pharmaceutical salesmen." The room went completely silent. "Ma'am," Rebecca continued, "I've seen the court records, the bank statements, and the phone logs. Your daughter is a thief and an adulteress who got exactly what she deserved." Valerie's face turned red. "You don't know what you're talking about. I know that David saved $120,000 for his children's college, and you stole every penny. I know that you lied about Aurora's paternity for 15 years. I know that you threatened to make false abuse allegations when you didn't get your way." Samuel stood up from the table. "Mom, you need to leave. Now." "Samuel, please," Valerie started. "No," Samuel interrupted. "I'm 19 years old. I've seen what you did, heard what you said, watched how you treated Dad. You made your choices. Now live with the consequences." Aurora, now 17 and more mature than her years, nodded in agreement. "Mom, I love you, but I can't respect you. You hurt our family for selfish reasons." Margaret grabbed Valerie's arm. "We're leaving. But this isn't over." "Yes, it is," I said firmly. "It's been over for 2 years. The only person who hasn't accepted that is you." After they left, Rebecca squeezed my hand under the table. "You okay?" she asked. "Better than okay," I replied. That was the closure I didn't know I needed. 3 years have passed since that final confrontation with Valerie and Margaret. Looking back, I can honestly say that the worst thing that ever happened to me turned out to be the best thing that could have happened. Pierce Industrial Climate Solutions is now the largest commercial HVAC contractor in the region. The divorce forced me to take a hard look at my business operations, and what I found was a company ready for major expansion. We've opened offices in 4 additional states and landed contracts with Fortune 500 companies. Samuel graduated from business school last spring and joined the company as operations manager. He's got a natural head for the technical side of the business and the leadership skills to manage our growing workforce. Aurora is finishing her senior year of high school with a 4.0 GPA and early acceptance to 3 pre-med programs. The money Valerie stole from her education fund has been replaced, and then some. She's planning to specialize in pediatric medicine, saying she wants to help kids the way her father helped her through difficult times. The DNA test results remain locked in my safe, and Aurora still doesn't know the truth about her paternity. Some secrets are meant to protect the people we love, and I've never regretted that decision. Rebecca and I got married last fall in a simple ceremony at the country club. No drama, no complications, just 2 adults who'd learned from their past mistakes and were ready to build something better together. Her twin boys have become part of our family, giving Aurora the brothers she'd always wanted. The pharmaceutical project that brought Rebecca into my life turned into a $20 million contract that established us as specialists in high-precision climate control systems. Sometimes the best things in life come disguised as business opportunities. Valerie is still living across town, working retail jobs, and struggling financially. I occasionally hear updates through mutual acquaintances, but her life choices are no longer my concern. I wish her well, but from a distance. Margaret Walsh developed health problems that forced her to sell her house and move into assisted living. The legal fees from her failed custody battle consumed most of her savings. Karma, it seems, has a sense of justice. Last month, Aurora asked me a question that made me realize how far we've all come. "Dad," she said, "do you ever wonder what would have happened if Mom hadn't had the affair?" I thought about it for a moment. "Honestly, sweetheart, I think we'd all be miserable and pretending everything was fine. Sometimes people do us favors without meaning to. She smiled and hugged me. I'm glad things worked out the way they did. So am I. The man I am today is stronger, wiser, and happier than the man I was when I was married to Valerie. My children learned lessons about integrity, consequences, and resilience that they never would have learned in a house built on lies. And I learned that sometimes you have to lose everything you thought you wanted to find out what you actually need.